So did you find some strange and unaccountable brain activity in your partners? Did you go, they make decisions like that? Well, actually, I would guess not so much in this group, because people tend to hang out with what? Likeness, people who are similar to them. The one study that's very, well, as Carol said, one of the studies that's very reliable on as a prediction of marriage success out of Stanford is that when you agree on 92%, in other words, the past history, similar economics, similar education, the more similarity there is, the more likelihood of success. There's less to disagree about. I wouldn't doubt it. They look for what's called compatibility or similarity. And you consider you're a self-selecting group. This is very different from people that are forced into situations, the draft, for example, or sometimes in a company where all sorts of different skills are needed, and you would then get more of a diversity of this. So I encourage you with the example I gave earlier of somebody who was in executive position and still had an other orientation, that you keep your eyes and ears open, because they're out there, and actually more than you might think. You're just not encountering them as much because of each of us, our own circle of contact. So any comments, observations, or reactions? Mm-hmm. Specifically, we had a challenge on natural in general. Yes. Yes, so specifically, he wasn't in your group.
Yeah, maybe I might...
Paul, yeah.
Yeah, this is the same thing. We're talking about the same thing here.
Mm-hmm.
Our explorer was talking about training programs.
All right.
No specific training programs, but training programs.
Mm-hmm.
And I would classify that as general.
I would too.
Okay.
Why?
Because there's no specific...
Ooh, I used a why question. Oh, I love it. Because I know what I mean by why, and you know what I mean if you didn't.
Yeah.
Okay, remember when we're talking about scope here.
We agreed on that.
Right, and scope is always sensory based, so as you go to more bigger pictures, you talk about training programs, you're talking about more than one program, and so in that sense, you're also abstracting as well as taking in a larger time frame or a larger space, because you've got this program and that program, whether you distribute it in space or time, you're being general. Whereas if you said the meta-program training, that would be more towards a natural. If you said the training today, even more so. If you said this segment of the training, definitely detailed.
So we agreed on that being general, but when she talked about trainers, or in a way the type of trainer she was looking for, I thought that was natural.
No, type of trainer is again towards abstraction, that all sorts of trainers would fit in there. Think of the natural scope. And again, you're inexperienced with this. This is a new idea in linguistics, much less an accepted idea in society. Natural chunk size has to do with how we naturally take on the world. You know, get me a quart of milk. Can you pick up some donuts while we're at this, when you go to the grocery store? You know, are you going to bring your car tonight? That kind of size, very much related to the physical world, and then if you have ideas to analog to that. You know, it's like, I'd say, Paul, bring that book. Oh, and bring those innovative ideas. You know, we'd say that those would be more natural. But if I was to talk about, you know, Paul, bring the whole of your life experience tonight. Well, then I'd, of course, be much more. Remember that comment you made at lunch? I bring that soon and tell the people at the meeting tonight about that. That, of course, would be a smaller scope. Yeah. Now, it's being confused here, and I understand, with abstracting. When people are going training programs, educational programs, programs in general, greater levels of abstraction, which is also more general. What I want to attend to in the decision process, though, is how much the person is scoping, that is being sensory based on how much world they're taking in, The reason for this is in other research, some of it along with Steve Andreas, we're discovering that a person doesn't have a sensory basis to their decisions. Their decision abilities begin to fall down. Executives that are really good at making decisions can both go very abstract and come right down and give you examples of, in the real world, how that decision is going to make a difference. So they can do both, right. So a key part of decision processes is how they scope. So this is a reason to put it into foregrounded.
So are all the other meta programs in the background?
To my way of thinking, yeah. And some of them were in the foreground. I mean, if you were listening, right, they were talking about matching and mismatching, or they might have been talking about being attracted or repelled from, of course. But for the purposes of learning and for the purposes of, in the NLP term, chunking the learning, we're saying feel free to restrict yourself to these right now. And then we'll do another set, and then we'll do another set. And then by then you'll go, oh, I see how these fit together. So the other half of this exercise could be that we have you play back to them their metaprograms or a mismatch of their metaprograms and notice the difference. My first consultation as I came out of Master Practitioner, basically my first business consultation as an NLPer, was to be hired by a technology firm that had lost a contract with a major New York entity, which will remain nameless because it's a major New York entity. And they were building communication systems. And they had the proposal, and I said, okay, give me the proposal that you sent that was rejected. And they also, because they said, because as the executives were leaving from the major New York concern, they said, look, you know, we want this, but you're not selling it. You're not selling it to us. You're not selling is what they were saying. And I said, give me the proposal, and do you have anything written by representatives of this entity in New York? Strangely enough, one guy had left behind handwritten notes of the meeting. And it was very, very curious because, well, you got the report. The report was this thick, the proposal. Of course, the sheet we got from the guy, a yellow legal pad, bullet points, some lines. I said, well, we can see a difference right there. And the very first line on it was, I can't see it. Now, those of you in NLP, you know I can't see it. All right. And as we took a look at it, my business partner and I, we also noticed some other things. In terms of the content, was that, can you imagine that these were engineers who had given them lots and lots of information? I know, hard to believe. And told all about the things and how they worked in great detail, right? And how interesting it was to them. Meanwhile, and this is not all the meta programs that we use, but meanwhile, the bank, we'd see their bullet points. They were looking for benefits criteria, something we'll get into in just a little bit with motivation. And they were also looking for activities, what it would do for them. What it would do for them. Okay, we're going to buy all this equipment. What difference is it going to make? So they were looking for active verbs. They were looking for the big picture. They were looking for how it was going to change their future. Right. And so my partner and I we had a weekend to do this. And so we got into his apartment and we were rewriting this whole thing. We ended up with, first of all, we had an executive summary, 1 page. Which scope size? General, of course. And inside the general, we listed a number of activities that would make a difference to what they thought was important. And then underneath that did other things and put in some graphics because they couldn't see it. So we visualize stuff and so forth. And also peeled the criteria, which we'll be getting to. And sent it back. And the guy who got it, he said, it's wonderful, but it's so much shorter. And we said, that's not the measure. Find out if it's accepted. And so with some reluctance, he dropped it into the overnight FedEx envelope, and it was arrived in New York, and it was accepted the next day. It's a nice story to be able to tell, especially, and encouraged me to think that I could be a consultant and kept me from stopping when I stumbled many times after that. So these learnings can help and hinder our future. But it really got me aware of something that I'd like you to have an experience of now. That is that these kinds of words make a difference. So, Ron, we've been having some fun with you. Would you come up here for a moment? And we've got Ron's partners in the room, of course. Yeah? That worked with him in the last exercise. And what did you find out about the situation that you were asking Ron about? Well, you hold that just a moment. You did agree on something? Go agree on something. I can see you don't quite agree yet. Because you can actually go at this in a much more simple way. Ron, that's a nice shirt.
Thank you.
How do you happen to have it?
How do I happen to have it?
Yeah.
I looked, actually a friend of mine, he started buying this particular brand of shirt. They were very durable, and they were also very stylish, and I figured that's, I may as well buy a couple of them, so I bought about 15. 15 different ones, yeah.
You bought about 15 different ones.
Yeah.
No, all right. If you...
Thank you.
Okay, so what do I know about this? That the content, it was about things, but what did he do? He immediately included somebody else, but he also bought 15 shirts. So we've got things, right? And what about perceptual positions? The self and the other, but yes. And other people do other and self. And where's his attention? It goes out and it comes back. Yeah, but it comes back. I bought 15 of them.
All over a period of time.
Over a period, okay, yeah.
It wasn't all at once.
Yeah, I was going to say in the time frame. Well, I asked him about the past. Remember how I'm already leading the system. Being the present, but of course, he already has this shirt. And he must have done it in the past. Well, he began to talk in the present as if the decision were happening now, as opposed to talking about it back then. So, and the scope? Again, realize I leaned the system. I talked about a shirt, natural chunk size. He stayed at that chunk size. He didn't go to clothing. He didn't go to protecting oneself from the elements. You stayed on that particular scope size, natural. Now, team members, what did you find out about? Yeah. No, durability is not specific. It's criteria. It's up. It's higher. We'll get to that. It's criteria. He's going to what motivated him. It's one of his motivating criteria, but that goes into the motivation part of the strategy more than into decision. But of course, as I say, they interweave, and I'm feeling free to concentrate on this.
It's also the fact that I've got extremely long arms, and these are some of the first shirts that actually fit properly on me. So that made a very big difference as well.
That made a big difference. So again, criteria. Yes, we're concentrating on these, but he's bringing it forward, more forward as we're speaking here. Yeah.
I kind of lost it a bit on time frame again. Could you go over that one more time?
What our friend here tends to do, again, tendencies, not absolutes, is that when he has an experience, he tends to have it in the present, as if it's happening now.
Even though it wasn't past.
Right.
He relates to it now.
Yeah.
Okay, so for time frame, it's present time frame?
I would say I would talk to him in the present about things.
Okay.
And of course, he does some past in the future, but majority of the time, he likes to hang out,
Okay.
Right here and right now.
as much as you like to.
Awesome.
Yeah. So, team, what did you find out? About what context?
When we were talking to him before, right now.
When you were talking to him before.
That the content was about a place.
All right.
He hung out himself for pretty well the entire time.
Okay.
It was in the
Mm-hmm.
when you went about making a decision, it was from looking in the past, those past references.
Okay.
But also future tense. He imagined also being in the future and having missed this opportunity to make this decision.
Okay.
And the scope of general.
Extreme big picture? He wasn't just seeing where he had the vacation.
Well, it was big,
It was a
it was a specific decision, but it really related to a bigger pattern in his life, actually.
Okay. Okay.
Purchase of shares of a bar that I'd owned.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You want to know more?
No.
No? Okay.
No.
We'll just leave that.
We'll leave it at that for the moment because there is a good deal of difference between these two elicitations. And there can be. It's just for a lot of people, there doesn't tend to be. Now, what I want to point out here is something along the lines of I can go, Ron, there's something I think that might interest you. And I'm curious, how it would fit into your life. And it's a situation that you can respond to. And, well, can I tell you more about it?
Please.
All right. It relates to what you can do
Okay.
and about things in the world.
What things specifically?
Okay, okay. Now, how about the other way? Ron, I think there's a situation I run into that might be interesting to you because of how it affects other people. And
Oh, well, okay.
uh-huh. Right. Or I'd come up and I go, Ron, I have something that might interest you. And because of just like what it just takes in so much time and so many possibilities.
Tell me more.
All right, all right. And because, well, when you step back and take a look at it,
Okay,
and right, well, what happened is I was inviting observer. So when we mismatch these kinds of categories, even speaking in generalities, the person will have a reaction. Does that make sense to you?
it does make sense, but trying to remember. I'm trying to think to myself, is that the case all the time, though? You know what I mean? Like,
Not at all. We are friendly primates when we get the chance, and some of us are not so friendly. But when we get the chance and have the interest, we will take the time to try and translate what that other person said into our own understandings. And what I'm endeavoring to do here with this little demonstration is to have you begin to notice what that looks like if you slow it down. I took away the content. I just went to blah, 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 because if I take away the content, you're not distracted by it. And if I slow it down one phrase at a time, you begin to get to see his reactions. But normally, we don't do something like that. It's like, Ron, there's this opportunity that I found. And while it doesn't directly relate to you, it's really more about other people. I thought about you because it's a kind of big picture kind of thing that could do a lot of stuff over time for a lot of people.
and myself, I assume.
Well, yeah, I did think of you.
Yeah. Well, I do like to consider others in the things that I do as well, but you know, it has to benefit me to some degree as well.
Now,
Otherwise it's not worth it.
I wish you hadn't said that because I come up to him and I go, Ron, I've got this project. Seriously, I'm involved in this project. And it involves communications, and it involves the internet, and it can make a huge difference for other people, but here's the deal. I need somebody who's got the kind of thinking that they would want to be involved with this because their abilities are just going to shoot through the roof if they get involved.
Sure, yeah, that makes sense compared to just other people. Obviously, I got to benefit to some
Right,
degree.
and that's what I did. You know, I said no, and it's true. It's like you get involved in this. The thing is to put something out there for other people. And in doing that, the only way that you can be involved in this is if you're willing to really develop your own skills and really get good at this yourself.
Sure.
All right? It's a different kind of, Now, that may seem obvious, especially to any readers of Ayn Rand.
And who's that?
Ayn Rand, Fountainhead, Atlas Shrugged, neoconservatism. The point is that there's a number of books where she takes the virtue of selfishness, and I go on about this because there's an assumption of a large number of people in our society that everyone is always self-interested. That is to say that they got the perceptual position of self, and their attention direction is to
Themselves.
yeah, exclusively. Whereas just a moment's reflection is that no matter how self-centered somebody is, they tend to extend and at least include their family. Even Saddam Hussein did that, all right? That there's the inside group that's protected, to go back to what you were saying, Michael, the we, right? And other people, it's more fluid. Ron's an example of it's more fluid, is that he didn't even know who the others were as long as he would benefit with that. And he doesn't need to benefit and have them not benefit. In fact, he'd like to have them benefit and himself benefit, if I've heard him
Well,
right.
it has to be reciprocal to some degree, right? Like
Right.
you can't just be the martyr, and you can't just be the one who takes everything. You've got to have it so that it has some kind of balance to it.
Now, this comes back to what I've been pointing out all along, is this set of meta programs, being in the self, attending to self, attending to other, gets built up out of a set of perceptions. I'm looking for my chart here. Gets built up at the perceptual level to where it becomes a value. All right? What starts out as a way of perceiving the world, what becomes a set of anchors for these different things. What's a strategy when Ron thinks about something and says, well, you can't be a martyr, but you can't just take. You got to do both. That's the strategy. Becomes part of a belief system. All built up from and on these fundamental distinctions. If you match his distinctions, he becomes very interested. If you mismatch his distinctions, he's less interested. And the example I give, the neoconservatives and so forth, is not in any way pejorative. It's simply a statement of that's the space they occupy. They hang around people that have those patterns, just like we hang around people that have our patterns and other patterns. And we begin to feel like, well, that's normal because that's what we're used to. The thing is, there's much more flexibility and possibilities in the world. And if you want to get his engagement, then you want to talk about how this is really about preserving the past for generations to come.
Really?
Maybe not.
No.
No, not at all.
No,
Thanks
not
for
at all.
coming up.
Thank you. Thank you, Carol.
And for someone else, with their orientations, it very well could be about preserving the past for generations to come, which we can now begin to model out as past time frame, other orientation, big scope, or general scope. Does that make sense? Okay. So here's what I'm going to invite you to do. You know each other, you were just in these groups, is to go back to the groups and do pretty much what you saw me do. Now, I've even given you the break here. So you can go back and you can say, Ron or Beatrice or Rachel and Paul, I have something that might interest you. You know, and you start to offer them what? Yes, you counterexample. Now, by the way, this is one of the fastest ways to test your work. We are, by nature, cooperative creatures. It may not seem like it sometimes, but we are by nature. We try to cooperate. Most of us, most of the time, big percentage. So if I say, would you go along with that? And there's a tendency to go, yeah, he's hesitating, but we want to cooperate. But if you put it in the opposite case, like you saw me do, if you present a counterexample, if it doesn't fit, what the tendency of the person to do is to go, no, or just non-verbally like you did, Ron, which is why I had you come up. Because even when you want to be subtle, you're like, yeah. You're kidding. You know, and the thing is, people are doing that all the time around us, and we're just not noticing. And they'll give you a hint, and they said, well, how would it be? And of course, Ron goes, well, it's got to have this, and it's got to have this. And you go, oh, well, now I know what the pattern is. So another form of elicitation is just what you've just seen done here. Is there's one form is to sit down with these forms, and there's different schools of NLP that offer a form you fill out with a person, either in person, over the phone, something like that. I prefer in person because of the nonverbals. And another way that you just saw demonstrated is to pick up anything in what they're wearing or what they're talking about, ask them how they made that decision, then you can find out in a moment at least some of this information, feed it back to them in counterexample. In other words, feed them back something different, and you'll go, well, okay, it's not that, not that, not that. And it's another way to close in on stuff. And of course, end with matching, good for rapport. Mm-hmm. Yes, that's exactly right. You give them something matching. You end up giving them something matching. This, by the way, also creates the illusion of progress. But now we're getting into meta patterns. Well, the idea that if you want somebody to experience you as progressing and developing and getting smarter, then notice their patterns, mismatch them a little while at first, and they'll go, God, this person has not got a clue. Then start matching their patterns, and they'll go, wow, they learn really quick. It's the management of perception. When you come back, I'll tell you how to go out on a date and have your date experience that she's known you for weeks when it's only been one evening. All right, back to those groups. Let's have some fun with this.